and a candy man. Like a freight train rolling, bringing truth bombs down the line. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. SCV chat starts now.
Do you know that Twinkle Twinkle Little Stars and the ABCs has the same tune?
No,
Think about it.
I don't want to.
How about singing Happy Birthday?
No.
That's not copyrighted music.
Actually, you'd be surprised. Some people still copyright that. Yeah, the more you know, huh?
Yeah, well, it's in the public domain.
Well, someone copyrights it.
Anyway, happy Monday, Harrison.
Happy Monday, Connor.
How are you today?
I am doing good. I'm actually currently doing what all of these great people should be doing, which is sharing this episode out. And of course, I have been getting ready for my business to launch and finish up some classes, and I will no longer be a broke college student. I will be a broke self-employed man.
Just in time for me to become a college student.
You know, the funny thing is someone was like, my friends are betting on if I'm going to end up going back to finish my degree in history for craps and giggles or get a master's in marketing now. So that's a betting pool between my friends. So me and you could end up still being college students together.
Well, Forrest is taking classes this summer, so.
Everybody is. It's back in style.
Yeah. Anyway, views, opinions expressed in this broadcast are not necessarily those of the SCV, GEC, nor any Division Brigades, camps, or other subsidiaries. Strictly those of us expressing, because we're going to be expressing opinions tonight.
Oh, yes. And as soon as I get done sharing this episode out, I can't wait to jump into this.
Yeah, it's actually a really good, this was a Moose Idea episode, everyone. So let's all give Harrison a round of applause.
Okay, that got me. I wanted to preface. You know what? That's honestly fair at this point. But part of this was really wanting to do stuff big for April. Of course, April is Confederate History and Heritage Month, and I have just really been trying to find the best Monday themes that we could do for the Monday show. Hence why I really want y'all to share these episodes out, because I would like us to get these just big episodes out to as many people as possible. But I've been seeing a lot of trailers for what we're reviewing. We're not reacting. I do want to preface that. We're not reacting to it simply because it would take so long to edit that into somehow 10 minutes. But
yeah,
I thought it'd be easier to review it. And luckily, actually not that bad. And we'll get into that more as we continue. But I just really wanted to do something like this, and I'm happy it turned out for the best.
Yeah. Which we'll get into it a little bit more when I'm going to fill some time really quickly as Harrison.
Thank you.
Harrison gets everything shared out so we can have his undivided Moose attention. Really quickly, good evening to everybody. Elliot Jackson there on YouTube, Wilfred Owens on YouTube, Dr. Sandy Mitchum, who I don't know if you know this or not, but they referenced your work in this video, Dr. Mitchum. Kyle, go ahead.
Well, this documentary mentioned him not once, but twice.
Yeah.
I actually have the timestamps because if I can get it to work, I was going to show some of it, but I'm probably not, simply out of copyright reasons.
Yeah.
I don't feel like having to deal with that because it's a big headache, and I'm a little busy right now. Oops, I just shared that on my business page.
Yeah. Well. And Kevin and David, of course, Kyle mentioned him. I heard y'all did have a good reunion in Tennessee this past weekend. Tennessee and Virginia both had theirs. Remember, it is reunion season, and if you were planning on going to reunions, get registered, especially for the Mississippi one because it's coming in slow. And I know that because I check the mailbox once a week, and yeah, I haven't gotten one in a while. Floyd from Hot Springs, Herb Turner from the great state of Missouri, Chuck McMichael is not. I don't know. I guess not going back to college, but he's not. He's again it.
He again it.
Al, good evening, and Kevin and Alan and Rich. I think that's everyone that we have, watching so far. But yeah, we're excited to do this. I'll go ahead and start with some of my views and opinions. I was kind of concerned how the Daily Wire was going to. I can name drop them, right? I just did.
Yeah, no, you can't. We kind of actually have to. What we are reacting to is the Daily Wire, specifically Matt Walsh, has started a documentary series. Not like a legit one, or a legit one that's modeled like the SCV chat show, an online television show called Real History, and his most recent episode is on the Civil War. So that's kind of what we'll be talking about.
And that's the only time we're going to call it that.
Yes.
And that is one thing that we'll get into, is he gets into the debate on what the name of the war was. But I was very very surprised at the at it. Especially we'll get into that, but hold on, I'm googling something really quickly. Especially given the fact that, well, I mean, he was born in Maryland, which is kind of, they're on the brink. Yeah, it's border state. He lived in Lexington, Kentucky for a while. So, it's not that bad. Not that bad. He has some southern ties. Not a ton. But yeah, so, but still, it coming from a more mainstream, quote, conservative news. What, Harrison?
So I've been talking, but it seemed like you were agreeing with me, so I didn't realize that I was muted. But
good job there, Moose.
I wanted to point out, it proves Carl Jones is right. Yankeedom is a state of mind, because it's funny that we have this. Basically, if you go by birthing standards, Yankee. But last week we had Jeb Smith on. He wasn't born in the South, and he just wanted the truth and went out, found it, and kind of discovered that we've been telling the truth the whole time.
Yeah. So that's that is good. That is a good point. But it's still from a like I was saying though, from my point of view, not having any direct ties that I know of, or that I could even find in the 2 minutes of research I did on him, links to the South, and our point of view on stuff, and just how he ended up presenting it. I was very, very, very surprised, especially on like what Chuck said. It's even better when non-Southerners make our points. I don't know how many on some of our points that he actually made. And we can go ahead and get into it if you want to, Moose, if you're done sharing stuff out.
Oh yeah, I just got done sharing stuff out, and I couldn't agree more. It is weird almost to hear our viewpoint be told by a major player in media.
Now, and I do want to preference it with this: he didn't get everything 100% accurate.
Yes.
There was some stuff that he, I wish he would have gone a little bit deeper on. Some of the stuff he kind of glanced over that we would have gone deeper on. in one of our episodes, and we have done in our past episodes. But I mean, as far as a general overalization, he did a good job, and also what I was talking about as far as from quote conservative unquote places, which PragerU is neoconservative. And of course, they did the hit piece on Robert E. Lee that we reacted to a couple of months ago, or years ago, actually. At this point,
yeah, no, it was our first reaction video, and that was something that I specifically wanted for the show. And Connor was like, "Oh, I know of a good one."
Yeah,
so it wasn't.
Yeah, so we so I was expecting something more along that it would be a deification of Lincoln, that it was done that way. I'll go ahead and we encourage everybody. You have to watch it through the Daily Wire Plus. I think it's like a $14 a month subscription.
Yeah, it's $14 a month, and basically you're just buying this episode. You can stay if you want to, but I would encourage everybody to watch it, because I'll get into my reasonings why and what I rate it on. I have two ratings. I have historical accuracy and just overall production of
Well, go ahead and give your ratings. We'll go ahead and do that now before we get into we'll give our ratings, and then and I guess that will give us a good jumping off point to go into some of the things that they talk about.
Yeah, no.
Hey, Jill.
Hey, Jill. Historical accuracy, I give it. Now, again, I do want to preference. I'm in the middle of finalizing my business and in finals, so I watched more than half of it. I only had like 20 minutes left overall, and that was my second time getting to that point. I got to the same exact point, ironically. For historical accuracy so far, I give it a 3.5 stars. It got a lot right.
Out of
5. And that means it did a pretty decent job. If you want to compare it to other hit pieces, other documentaries that have been released about the war in the past 20 years, it probably rates highly up there, because the majority of them is just slander and hit pieces against us. And overall, I'll rate the doc 4 stars. Again, in the promotion for this episode, I called it probably one of the biggest docs we've had in a while on the war, as well as the most fair in 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
That's why I encourage everybody to watch it, because it does get a lot right, and it could be a gateway for a lot of members or potential members that are on the fence, or people that just are hard set in their ways, like most conservatives, like at PragerU, who did a hit piece. They felt like they had to do that so they wouldn't be called, the evil R word.
Yeah, whatever they would be called.
But I
was able
to do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I was able to watch the whole thing. I finished the last 22 minutes of it, sitting up here, in show prep, and overall, I would give it both a 4. The one thing that as far as plugging it on historical accuracy goes, the one thing that stands out in my mind that he should have done better on, and is and we'll get into how he structures it, but they bring up a clip from, I can't remember, it's from the Ken Burns documentary, or if it was from C-SPAN's Book TV. But it's a clip of Shelby Foote, and he's talking about the death of Stonewall Jackson. And of course, he doesn't go into dying of pneumonia, which, is that Jackson being one of the big heroes of mine. He's so, the people on the other side, when they denigrate him, they say, yeah, he was shot by his own men. Ha, ha, ha. And that ticks me off.
It really does.
And they leave out the fact, and especially because, I've done research into, Jackson's death. They leave out the fact that, he had pneumonia. They leave out the fact that he believed in hydrotherapy, which, he had a wet cold compress put on the side, which, helped the pneumonia set in, everything like that, on a cold May evening. So he leaves that out. Or memory serves right, he leaves that out. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he talks about the pneumonia. But anyway, I digress back to Shelby Foote, and Shelby's talking about Dr. McGuire coming in after Mrs. Jackson has told General Jackson that he's going to die, and he says, Doctor, my wife tells me that I'll be with the Lord this day. And Dr. McGuire says yes, and he says, good, I always hope that I died on a Sunday. And then Matt Walsh leaves it as like he died, and he leaves out the portion, a couple hours later, Jackson, under labor breathing, said, let us cross over the river and rest in the shade of the trees, which is one of the most beautiful quotes, deathbed quotes that there is out there. Wish he'd have gotten that right. But, as far as nitpicking goes, that is one of my, few nitpicky things that I can throw out there. Overall, telling the story, and which we like, fair history. We like, for it to be what it is. So it was pretty well done. So essentially, now he doesn't go into an entire defense of the Confederate soldier or the defense of the Confederacy's cause at first. The way that he goes and does it is he uses Robert E. Lee as the jumping off point. And the reason why he does that, now I'm going to digress and get into a little bit of fiction. Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, would have been around 2009-ish, I think, writes a trilogy of what if the South won the Battle of Gettysburg, and alternate history. And in that, either the second book or the third book in that trilogy, it deals with General Lee and talking about how Robert E. Lee essentially epitomizes or is the visual representation of the Confederate cause. When you think about that and you look at it, he is one, if not the most notable figure of the war between the states. I remember years ago, in April, going to my local library and there being the placard, closed on Confederate Memorial Day. And instead of having a battle flag or a First National or a Confederate monument or something like that, it had a picture of Robert E. Lee on there. So, by opening that door, by using Lee as a way to go in, and Lee representing, and he goes into that so much of the South and the South's point of view, he's able to open that door to apply that to the rest of the Confederacy or the vast majority of the Confederacy. So I like how he did that. He picks a lightning bolt, or not a lightning bolt, a lightning bolt, but a lightning rod, with Lee, especially with everything like we're seeing the statue just in the background there from Monument Avenue. Or they show the clips of the statue of Lee that was in Charlottesville, Virginia, that was taken down and disassembled and wrongly destroyed. Or the statues in Statuary Hall. Because he is the most famous epitomization of the Confederacy, he's able to open a door that way. So I do like how they did that with storytelling.
And I mean, let's be honest, he's the easiest person really to defend, mainly because of his popularity after the war. I mean, right. Lee was Lee. I mean, there's no way to describe him other than that is Robert E. Lee. And he talks about how he was a symbol of patriotism, of leadership, of greatness. And he was always put with the likes of George Washington.
Yeah. And he uses the Dwight D. Eisenhower, Ike, his actual voice recording of him talking about, the greatest Americans. He talks about, ironically, Lincoln and Lee in the same sentence, in the same quote. But he also brings up, the Winston Churchill quote, Churchill writing that, quote, he was one of the noblest Americans that ever lived, one of the greatest captains known in the annals of war. So, he does start off with that, talking about, just how in the last 50 years, how much Lee meant to the nation. But I copied this verbatim. I'm trying to get my notes to pull up on the side screen over here. trying to find it. He calls the last 10 years a master class in historical malpractice, so jaw-droppingly stupid that most sane people would simply change the channel if it were a TV show.
I mean, he's not wrong, and that's why I like that he's like, 10, 15, 20 years ago, he was a bona fide hero, bulletproof. You didn't touch him, and we were all celebrating Lee, North and South alike. And then all of a sudden, he's evil. And I really like how he started the documentary off with that, with the quotes from famous people throughout history that are still admired to this day. To be like, look, these people that you still say are good people, look who they said were good men.
Right. And then it goes into, he begins talking about how things started taking a turn, but it wasn't immediate until the last, couple of decades. And then he does what, we've done on this program and what is right, but he lays the blame on the foot of so-called conservatives in the South for the political and historical political upheaval that's happened, and even brings up the clip of Nikki Haley when she was governor of South Carolina. It's time to take the flag off the state house lawn. Yeah, that's my Nikki Haley impression. But rightfully so, lays it at that. Nikki Haley in that case. We have one gentleman in Mississippi. I use that term very loosely.
Very.
Who's running for governor? Who was instrumental in taking our state flag away? Who did it, under the guise of conservatism. And like I said, he's running for governor, and it's what we see happening so often in the South is that those who we elect, we support, my views and opinions, turning their back on and stabbing us in the back. And he also said, quote, the retreat opened the floodgates for anti-American radicals who literally desecrated the grave of Robert Lee's horse, melted his statues, and slandered his reputation. And that's right. This retreat from conservatives in the South that led to this is the reason why these floodgates have been open. Reason why we see things like happening in Mississippi, Georgia, other places going on the way that it is.
And I mean, I do like that. He talks about Leonard Skinner, all this stuff. Some great quotes about Lee. And, of course, he starts out one of my favorite quotes with Patrick Clayburn.
Right.
And, I mean, he was like, he even said it, while it took some time, Clayburn was right.
Yeah, the quote of, if we lose the war, that means that Southern students will be taught by Northern teachers from Northern textbooks, and et cetera, et cetera. We all know the quote. So I mean, he does lead in with that. So go ahead, Mace.
No, I just wanted to mention kind of what we've been talking about with past Commander-in-Chief, the Lone Ranger Chuck McMichael, saying that none of these parties are our friends, and I mean he's absolutely right, but I can see the benefit from this doc that hopefully it opens a lot of conservative, and I say that word, I don't say the other word because I don't like that party, but I hope it opens a lot of conservatives' minds to the fact that we have been just slandered, lied about, and let it not go unnoticed. Before this episode, now I don't know how this current doc is being reviewed yet. I think we're one of the first people to actually review it. Most people have focused on his first two, with this one just releasing in April, which no one can tell me he didn't plan that. He knew that.
Well, no, he released it March 22nd, but in time
March.
for April.
Just in time for April. But again, he released it during Confederate History and Heritage Month, or for Confederate History, Confederate Heritage Month. But these other documentaries have been praised by conservatives as, wow, I cannot believe, it's taken this man to dive into true history.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the benefits from this, it will hopefully be to open people's eyes about the war between the states.
Yeah, so he then and like we've said, he does it under the guise of Robert E. Lee, talking about
Hmm.
Robert E. Lee specifically. As a way to open the door and do things like that. But again, you could take much of Lee's ideas about I won't, I don't agree with it, but I'm going to fight with my state. I'm going to stay with my state. Loyalty to state and everything like that, and apply to many other Confederate soldiers. So just want to again put that in there. He does talk about how history is not as black and white as people portrays it, and how it is gray, a lot of gray.
I
Um,
I loved how he described it. He said we get often when you do that, you get this cartoon version of
yeah,
history that basically is what you teach to kids. And
right.
he nailed
Yeah,
it on the head of the nail there.
yeah, he did, and essentially just a an oversimplification of history that people get that almost makes it like he says a cartoon caricature. He then goes into talk about Lee's biography. Lee's father, being Light Horse Harry Lee of the Revolution, marrying George Washington's great step granddaughter, and everything that went along with it. He talks about Lee's education at West Point and being the Marble Man. Shows the picture of Lee's portrait that was at West Point. And everything that goes along that went along with it. So that is again talking about his prominence, and then he begins talking about the Battle of Chancellorsville. That's when he gets into Jackson's death, obviously, but how the tactics at West Point. It does a pretty good overall view of the tactics. Um, the tactical scenario within 3 minutes as best as you can of Lee's genius at the battle. Um, and how it's still taught to this day in several military colleges throughout the world.
Mhm.
But then he goes into some of the deeper issues about halfway through, because you've got and I like how he did that. He explains who Robert E. Lee was and gives you the warm fuzzies towards Robert E. Lee, and then he goes into the actual issues of the war, because by this point you're invested in it.
Mhm.
If you haven't decided to change the channel by then, you're going to hear what he wants to put out there. Go ahead.
Oh, I love how he tackles the name of the war as well. I know we're about to jump into the
Yep.
issues.
No.
Uh,
Well, that's my next point. He goes into what the war was.
mhm. And how Lincoln and even the United States government referred to it as the War of the Rebellion for years, and how the South, the two most prominent in the South, was the War for Southern Independence and the War between the states, which of course I did call it the War between the states. And he talks about just how no one really called it that. And he even explains what an actual
Yeah.
civil war is and how it does not apply to this war.
Yeah.
I
So
think the only reason he called it that in the title is just because that's how you sail.
yeah, well that's just the modern, I guess, what has been ingrained in everybody's head.
Yeah.
Lexicon, so for us to view that war. I mean, everybody thinks about, I'm going to a Civil War battlefield. Yeah, no, you're not. You're
Mhm.
going to a War for Southern Independence or War of Northern Aggression battlefield. Anyway, so he actually goes into that. And I'm glad you brought that up. He talks about how Lincoln called it a rebellion because he had to make that argument in order to, circumvent the Constitution. He had to, in order to put down a rebellion, he'd have those powers, war powers for X number of days.
Mhm.
But he does not, but and they call it that to frame themselves, of course, as a victor. And that's the other thing that he talks about, is that history is written by the victors.
Mhm.
So yeah. But he goes into and correctly states that the war is not a civil war. He talks about how there is no historical evidence about how the South wanted to take over New York City or Boston, and that is definitely for sure. And he goes into the fact that ideology, the ideology of what the United States was.
Mm.
Was it a collection of independent states joined together for their common welfare, as the preamble of the Constitution says, or is it a collection of states subservient to a centralized government or centralized power? Um, Hey, Temple from YouTube, I appreciate your asking that question, but that's not on topic for tonight.
Yeah,
Tonight we're reviewing this, continue to view, and everybody else continue to view. We just don't want to.
get off topic.
Yeah, we just don't want to. We just don't want to get off topic on that. But definitely happy that you're watching for us. And we'll have some episodes where we are a little bit loose on stuff. In the future. But anyway, he goes into that and the ideology of essentially what we've talked about in here, Jeffersonian versus Hamiltonian America or Lincolnian America. He talks about, the Shelby Foote quote, the greatest thing that came, or the biggest thing that was settled, or not, hasn't been settled yet. But the biggest thing that, came out of the war, the United States were, and now it's the United States is, or are. We went from a plurality to a singularity.
I do like how he shouts out Shelby Foote as a great historian, because again, that's another thing that they've done in recent years is just slander Shelby Foote, because he was probably one of the other few people that gave us an actual chance and told true history.
Right. Well, then he goes into the secession crises. Or not so much crises, but the history of secession in the United States. I don't remember if he talks about the Declaration of Independence, being a secession document or not. But I do remember that he talks about how after the Constitution, delegates from Massachusetts, delegates to the United States Congress from Massachusetts, and I think New Hampshire or some New England state approached John Taylor, Virginia, and talked about how we need to go ahead and break apart the Constitution, break apart the Union, because we're not going to get along together. And Carl, I know you're cooking wings, but I know you know about that, so correct me in the chat. But he talks about that. He talks about how during the War of 1812, many New England states wanted to secede because they were so tied into commerce with Great Britain. And he talks about how for a vast majority of the time, it was New England and the North that wanted to break away from the South, not necessarily us.
I think he counted historically proven there are at least 5 times the North wanted to secede. And I mean, as early as 2 years after the Constitution, New York and Connecticut wanted to secede, and he goes into multiple times how that has happened, and even as early as or late as, I think, what was it that the last time the North wanted to secede, it was like 1820, 1830, like very soon with the war down the line that these people were saying they wanted to secede. And then, of course, 20, 30 years later.
Over the war for Texas independence, or not Texas independence, annexation of Texas, Mexican-American War. Which I never, heard about that. But again, he's taking the idea that, the South was the only ones that wanted to leave the United States. And shows that we had these differences and ideas on what the government should and should not be, and it all goes down to culture. And he talks about that later on. I'll get into that with my notes later. But he talks about how that was all there from the beginning. And that's something you do not see, like in Ken Burns. You do not see that. It was just the South wanted to, and he, like I said, he does a good job with that. Go ahead, Moose.
Oh, he does a great job. I think he spends about, it looks like in my notes, because I did have some time stamps, looks like for about 1/3 of this doc, he's talking about secession, talking about Davis's viewpoint on it, talking about Shelby Foote's viewpoint on it, but more importantly, the one I loved that he tied it into, and I hope I'm not stealing your thunder, Connor, because you can explain these points a lot better than I can. But he ties it back to George Washington and the first American Revolution. That the reason Washington is called a patriot and hailed as a hero is because he won his war.
Yeah, I had that in my notes. But also, doesn't he talk about, the fact that Jefferson Davis was not, he talks about Davis, and that he was not brought up on treason. trial.
And
That's mentioned that the federal government did not want to bring him up on trial for treason because they knew that they would lose, and then therefore secession would be legal, everything would be done, and they just spent $2 million in at least $2 million
yeah.
And countless lives in fighting a war that the South was completely legal. Here we go. Carl's chiming in. Thank you, Carl.
Yeah, and like the funny thing about that is he says Davis even wanted a trial because he wanted to prove the legality of secession, and how Abraham Lincoln even said that, why my office dictates I should want Davis arrested. I hope that somehow in the middle of the night he gets away, and if that happens, I wouldn't be hurt, because he knew that they couldn't put him on trial. The United States government knew they couldn't put him on trial, and they couldn't try all these Confederates as traitors and treason because they would lose that case. Even the Supreme Court Chief Justice was like, I don't want to touch that.
Yeah, and it wasn't until Texas v. White that they, just slip in there that secession was unconstitutional. Not even a case dealing with secession.
And he even points out that, he feels like the viewpoint on his secession legal has never really been talked about, and should be, because he's like, as you said, he's like, that case had nothing to do with it. They threw it in there 30 years later, and it took 30 years for them to try to attack secession because they knew they'd lose, and they thought if they just slid it in, they'd get away with it and prove that, secession was illegal. And I mean, how many times have you heard when we talk about secession, some woke Yankee comes in the comment section to talk about that court case?
Yeah.
And now it's been brought into the light that they just trying to sneak that in there.
Right. They then go into now that's where my memory breaks off from the last one, and this is a good portion for us before we jump into another topic that he does, to take our commercial break.
All right, perfect. Because I was about to say I do know where he jumps into. If you want me to just kind of tell you and let you run.
No, because we're in a good
perfect
break. Yeah, commercial time.
Let me get to the commercials. All right. Well, our first commercial break is, of course, Dr. Chris Cummins.
Our first sponsor.
Our first
for our commercial break.
You could tell I am brain dead today. Our first sponsor this evening is, of course, Dr. Chris Cummins, MD. Have you fallen off a fence recently? Have you tweaked your knee? Have you poked your eye with a stick? Well, have no fear. Dr. Cummins is here. He will make you feel good and treat you with some great Southern hospitality, to the point where you're going to want to skip that apple today to go see the doctor. He is a life member of the SCV. He is at a new address at 105 Heritage Drive, Suite 111. And how cool is it? He's on a drive named Heritage. And he will take a look at your knee pain, if you have any, and make you feel good. So go check out Dr. Chris Cummins, MD, in Oxford, Mississippi today. And our next sponsor is, of course, 31st Reg Engraving. They just started doing some engraving on some bottles, which, my gosh, do I want. But he also does these memorial wristbands for your ancestors. Of course, you see mine on here, so I can put it on every day and remember Private S.O. Dawes and why I do what I do to make sure his good name is honored and every other brave man that fought in that war. So go check out 31st Regiment Engraving at www.31stregengraving.com. They have some great stuff, including those earrings. So if you're looking for something for your wife, girlfriend, or anything else, I guess. I guess that covers everything. But maybe don't get them both at the same time. Go check out 31stregengraving.com. Of course, next up is Beauregard's Taylor, a family.
And that's where I'm going to talk in, because Andrew Casimir over at Beauregard's Taylor does a lot of great things, including replica flags, T-shirts, and high-quality uniforms, but he also has lapel pins. Harrison and I have a lapel pin that we wear from Beauregard's Taylor from time to time, but he just had some other lapel pins come out of the second national flag, but there was a little bit of a misprint on them. So he was selling those for $1 a piece. And I happened to go ahead and buy 10 of them, and they just made it into my mailbox today. So we're going to do something with those pins at National Reunion.
Ooh.
Yes. So I don't know how many of those pins Andrew has on his site, but go ahead and get you one while you can. That's BeauregardsTaylor.shop to look for those. But for the ones that I have for sure ordered, we will be doing something with those at National Reunion. I don't know what yet, but come to Kentucky if you want to find out.
And I just want to point out, I just bought a flag and some stickers from Beauregard's Taylor. As I said, I'm soon not to be a broke college student, and I've always wanted a copy or a replica of the 11th Mississippi flag, also known as the University Grace here at Ole Miss. So I was able to get that flag and 2 stickers for a very reasonable price. I believe for a 1 flag and 3 stickers, it was under $50. It was great definitely for a broke college student, so I can celebrate in style when I graduate in a couple weeks.
Did you see that he has caps with the original First National pattern now?
I saw that, and I really wanted to get one, but I had to pace myself because I wanted to get these flags first and the stickers because I'm going to place them on a couple people at my graduation celebration in May. But yes, go check out Beauregard's Taylor. Again, very affordable too for the broke people out there.
Well, and the historical research he puts into it, whether it's his uniforms or the flags, is just chef's kiss.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. He even has the second version of the 11th Mississippi flag, which is one of those that took a while to research, even on Stark Miller's side of things. So it's great to see that he has a historical accurate on both of them. So that's another great thing. And of course, our next sponsor is the museum at Market Hall, home of the Confederate Museum since 1899. They are open Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. If the flag is out, they are open. Admissions.
And go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead.
I was going to say, remember that this month that they have, I'm trying to pull it up, special diversity in the Defense of the South display, limited time display going on, or exhibit rather going on. Go check them out. And also remember, we did an interview with Jill a couple weeks ago where we showed several of their artifacts, swords, some of the big giant portrait of Beauregard, the Revolutionary War, and War Between the States drum. Definitely go check them out. And remember, they also have a friends portion that you can join if you want to help them in their cause.
Yes, and they did some phenomenal work. And of course, remember, their shipping is only $5 as well. And they have a phenomenal gift shop that you should go check out. Again, you can check them out at museum@markethall.com. And of course, check them out. If flag is out, they are open. And our last sponsor for this evening is, of course, the Sam Davis Home and Museum. There are many things to do at the historic Sam Davis Home and Museum in Tennessee. You could go walk through their herb garden, take some nature walks.
Did you just say herb?
Yeah, I said herb.
No. In American English, the H is not pronounced. It's herb.
Herb garden.
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing this for like 3 weeks, man. Where have you been? help a poor dyslexic kid out. Dag nabbit. Bring your dogs for a game of catch. Visit the 19th century smokehouse kitchen and slave cabins and so much more. Visit the final resting place of Sam Davis and several family members. Watch a great film about Sam Davis inside. Explore the museum galleries. Participate in a scavenger hunt. Tour the historic home, and of course, visit their great gift shop for souvenirs.
Scavenger hunt.
Homemade and local goods. Pro tip, give yourself at least an hour and a half to 2 hours to fully enjoy your experience. You can figure out more about them at samdavishome.org. One more time, that's samdavishome.org. Cut his John! Help a golly, y'all just attacking a man tonight. And of course, we wouldn't be anywhere without our lovely people over at Patreon. So go check us out on Patreon. You can join us for $2.50 a month to feed a moose. That's basic support. For $10 a month, you can become a real chat head and get behind the scenes content.
And we could buy Hooked on Phonics.
And we could buy Hooked on Phonics for Moose. And and I hate you so much. And you can get a glimpse at some of our upcoming projects because we've got a lot of great things in the works, exclusive shows, and so much more. And of course, for $30 a month, you get exclusive merchandise that not even me and GCB get, the owners of SCV Chat. And of course, you can join our great sponsors for $80 a month and get promoted on the beginning of every episode, and of course during our commercial breaks. We want to thank everybody so much for supporting us and helping us reclaim the narrative week at a time, and we will be right back after this quick Pop-Tart break.
There is a place nestled in the rolling farmland of southern Middle Tennessee, a home constructed in 1837, nearly lost to the ravages of war. Saved by a servant and a Confederate general. A place where families loved and lost. If walls could talk, what stories could be told? If a place, a home, can feel love, loss, pain, surely this is one of those places. Nearby is a more recent structure, and inside are the stories of heroes and heroines, stories of battles won and lost, stories of sacrifices made by the people of its native soil. A place that will tell the true and complete story of the Southland and the war fought for its freedom. From the causes that led to the conflict to the modern-day struggles to protect Southern history. Historic Elm Springs and the Confederate Museum at Elm Springs are the general headquarters for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. A place where the story of the Southland and its historic struggle is preserved and told. Come and discover your history.
Man, y'all really know how to kick a moose when he's down. And of course, thank you again to all our sponsors and Patreon members. We couldn't do this show without you, literally. And thank you for your support. And because of that, we are continually pushing the envelope to reclaim the narrative 1 week at a time. So join us here over on Patreon and really help us out and help us do some great things. You'll see a sneak peek of that very soon.
Go buy a t-shirt.
Yes, also go buy a t-shirt because for until July 4th or July 5th, and I want to see these shirts everywhere on July 4th, you can get The South Was Right in 1861 because America Was Right in 1776 shirt for 15% off if you use the promo code 250. And if you can't figure out why the promo code is 250, I can't help you.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So, yeah. Going back to because we're at 51 minutes.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Still so much.
Yeah. So going back. Go ahead.
Oh, I was like, there's just so much to go to, and probably some of my favorite stuff is right now because he spends. We already talked about how he spent a lot of the documentary talking about George Washington to get people, or George Washington, Robert E. Lee, to talk about getting people on the side, getting people interested, and people to really understand the man better. And then he talked about secession, but the big one is up now, the cause of the war between the states. And this is where he quotes a phenomenal book by Dr. Mitchum. The war wasn't about slavery. So I do highly recommend you get that because there's a lot of great sources in that book. And he kind of jumps into this topic head first for someone that is not from the South. Again, this is where the 4 stars come in for me, how he tackles this topic and really, really nails home that, to quote about Selby Foote, which he does, one of the quotes I've been using a lot lately in talking to people, trust me, neither of these sides really gave a damn about the African American community.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do remember that because that's where I jumped back in with my listening this evening. And he does do a good job about slavery. He brings up the Lincoln. Well, I love the fact that he brings up both Lincoln and Davis's views on the war, what the war was really about. And he goes into, Lincoln or Davis's, he doesn't quote, all we ask is to be let alone, but it's another quote about dealing with independence. But he does bring up the famous quote about Horace Greeley, or to Horace Greeley about, my primary goal is to preserve the Union. If I was to go with, preserve the Union with, freeing all of them, freeing none of them, or leaving some in bondage, I would do that. That's a very gross simplification of the quote. But he does do that. What I liked about what he does is he actually brings up the Northern Black Codes in states like Lincoln's own Illinois and New Jersey and stuff like that, where in states that that the for the vast majority, and he talks about the abolition movement in the South. Mm-hmm. How it was more prominent in the South than it really was in the North, leading up until the Eli Whitney's cotton ginning.
And I think he even says there are over 100 societies with that dedication.
Right, and he does talk about how as northern states began to abolish slavery, the people in turn went and sold their slaves down to the South. Yep. And they still, profited over, the institution of slavery as well. With Southern agricultural industries, things of that nature, how they depended on it, but it just gave them a moral superiority. Now I'm not going to say that he says that. I don't remember if he says that exactly or not, but I'll say that in my views and opinions.
I agree. That's the whole reason they use that is the moral superiority high ground to keep also other countries from interfering with the war.
Well, and he does talk about that. But like I said, when he goes into the Black Codes, he says that most of the Northerners opposed the expansion of slavery because they did not want to help the black race. They did not want, not because they wanted to help the black race, but because they did not want black neighbors.
Yep. Same thing that happened in the West. He talks about Lincoln's home state, which got me fired up about how even Southerners called their laws on the African-American community ruthless and awful, and used all these adjectives that I'm not even going to try to use because apparently I need hooked on phonics. But he talks about how, of course, as you already pointed out, how the North got rid of slavery. But that's because they either sold it to the South or they slowly, like the South wanted to, got rid of it instead of, what happened.
Yeah. And he even talks about how Lincoln, of course, with the Emancipation Proclamation, didn't, it still left people in bondage in the two northern states that had slavery as a legal institution, as well as in those areas under federal occupation at that time. Harrison, don't use your own Facebook page. Don't use your own Facebook page to make your point.
Actually, that is the 5th Brigade Councilman, Mr. Keith Newsom, that is on the 5th Brigade page. So I want to thank Mr. Or actually, no, that's on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so the 5th Brigade recently just got.
So anyway, back to the point.
I know you didn't just do that. That is Justin Calhoun in the 5th Brigade. He is the 5th Brigade Heritage Promotion Officer, and he is taking over the YouTube duties for me. So go check that out. Thanks for that.
But anyway, he does, he does say that slavery was an issue, but it was not the issue.
Yes.
And we've said that on this program. Was it an issue for secession? Was it an issue for motivating some people? Yes, but again, and to go back to what Walsh said, an oversimplification of history that we've seen over the past several decades gives us this cartoon caricature, and it's not all black and white as people would say.
Yeah, and he also points out, as you talked about, how the North heavily profited from slavery in the South, and how only 1/3 of Southerners actually owned slaves, and how many Southerners. He talked about how this one historian went through a lot of letters. I think it was over 1,000 letters from soldiers, and the majority of Southern soldiers, and this is a quote, wanted to join to protect hearth and home.
Right. And he also goes into that. It was James McPherson. It was the historian he was talking about, but McPherson also found several accounts where Northern soldiers did not. A vast majority of Northern soldiers did not go to fight for the institution of to do away with the institution of slavery. Rather, it was their twisted ideal of keeping. They thought that the government would just up and dissolve. So he goes into if the war was not over slavery, what was it about? Purely about it. And he goes into the tariff and economics of the war, and he brings up the address from the South Carolina General Convention. I'm trying to I have it pulled up. And South Carolina put this out December 25th, 1860. And he quotes this, so I'm going to quote him quoting it. And so the southern states towards northern states in the vital matter of taxation, they are in the southern states in a minority in Congress. And again, he talks about the political power that has, somewhat changed, drastically changed, how it was, somewhat even by the eve of the war. There were more representatives because of the European immigrants coming over per capita, or not per capita, but there were more, representatives in the North in the House representatives than there were in the South. You had more Northern representation, as well as the fact that the Republican Party was a sectional party, out of the North, and the South felt politically unequal anymore. But the representation in Congress is useless to protect them against unjust taxation. And they are taxed by the people of the North for their benefit, exactly as the people of Great Britain taxed our ancestors in the British Parliament for their benefit. For the last 40 years, taxes laid by the Congress of the United States have been laid with a view of subserving the interest of the North. The people of the South have been taxed by duties on imports, not for revenue, but for an object inconsistent with revenue, to promote by prohibition Northern interest in the production of their mines and manufacturers. So essentially what he's saying is that the North is through the tariff system, through things that are being, taxed on the South. We're taking the money from the South because I think 3/4 of the world's cotton was being produced in the South at that time. And us being an agricultural people, not an industrial people, we, were more, we needed imports from Europe more than anything else. And because those were being taxed and we're having to pay the taxes on them, those monies were then being shipped up north and paying for railroads, paying for industries like mines, manufacturers, the Erie Canal, things like that. I'm like that he actually pulled that quote out. Because it does, again, he doesn't do the full quote, but it lays out that the South was fighting, that the South was right in 1861 because
America was right in 1776.
And he goes into the cultural portions of the war, how we are different cultural people. Again, agrarian culture versus industrial culture. He doesn't go into it as much as, because it's, towards the end, as Albion Seed does, where it, talks about puritanical versus Scotch-Irish and planter culture mix. But, how we've never really gotten along. And he pulls a quote, weirdly enough, from Karl Marx, talking about the tariff and things like that. He says the war between the North and the South is a tariff war. The war is further not for any principle, does not touch the question of slavery, and in fact turns on Northern lust for sovereignty. And that was from Karl Marx on October 20th, 1861, that he quotes. Another, through there, the war between the North and the South, so runs the first excuse, is a mere tariff war, a war between a protectionist system and a free trade system. So again, throwing that out there was a really, really refreshing to hear that in there.
I can't tell you how good watching this documentary felt for me. I was like, my gosh, there's someone else out there that actually cares about true history.
Well, I mean, it's the fact that he did a service with it. And did you make it to the Karl Marx quote with your watching, Harrison?
I did not, so that one surprised me,
Okay.
and I was like, wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah. So you go on into it, and I'll close up with my two things that I was very proud that he did.
So I guess in closing, again, I'll say 4 out of 5 stars.
If I was talking about any other historical evidence before I move on to the two things that I was proud of in his historical research he did.
No. This is the part I wanted to get to. So if you have something else, you're more than welcome to jump into it.
Yeah. So he then goes and talks about John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry and how the North and the South were completely different, and how Lee went and he actually called John Brown an insurrectionist, which was very, very surprising. But he goes and talks about how Lee led men to capture John Brown, led 90 Marines. They captured Brown. But then he talks about how all of the abolitionists went and were deifying Brown, talking about, martyr this, martyr that. And he says at that point, the South realized it was more than just disagreeing. It's that the North actually hated us. Mm-hmm. And at that point we could see their hate, towards the South and everything like that. One other thing that he talks about, just because it just popped in my mind, when he talks about the Northerners fighting for the Union, he talks about how a lot of immigrants from Europe at that time did not want to see their new country torn apart and become like the German states during that time, because there's a bunch of communist revolutions over there. Sorry. Anyway, digressing. But he talks about how the North actually began, the puritanical North, began hating the South and wanted to see us die, wanted to see us, trampled, and just exactly what and a good example of that is, he doesn't mention that, but he kind of plays it during that time in the background, but the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Of course, we're getting close to Memorial Day. So remember, it's not a song to sing in church. It literally translates to War Song of the Nation, or War Song of the Government. Anyway, and it's racist. Let's talk about murdering Southerners. But anyway, but he talks about that, how, and Harriet Beecher Stowe, now she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, Julia Ward Howard, who was part of the abolitionist movement, and of course the music being to John Brown's Body, that song is a representation of the North's hatred towards the South. And he talks about that. Then he goes into something that I was very surprised at, and I'm very proud of. He goes into Lincoln bashing.
Yeah.
And he actually talks about, let's look at Abraham Lincoln, and the same, viewpoint that we have with Robert E. Lee. He was a man of his times. He had ideas of his time. And he brings up the fourth Lincoln-Douglas debate, where Lincoln says, "I will not say that I am not, nor have ever been in favor of bringing about any way the social and political equality of the white and black races. That I'm not, nor have I ever been in favor of making voters and jurors of them, nor of qualifying them to hold office, nor to intermarry with white people. And I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and the black races, which I believe will forbid the two races living together on terms of social and political equality. And inasmuch as they cannot so live while they do remain together, there will be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. I say upon this occasion, I do not perceive that because the white man is to have the superior position, that the black should be denied everything. I do not understand that because I do not want a black woman for a slave, I must necessarily want her as a wife. He quotes that directly from Abraham Lincoln. You know, a lot of that quote is often left out, but he quotes it directly, and he talks about how Lincoln had those views and everything like that. He talks about how Lincoln wanted in 1862, he sent a letter to Congress wanting a joint resolution for the paid emancipation of slaves, and how Lincoln supported colonization back to African movements and things of that nature. He doesn't whitewash Lincoln as well as he does, or as well as most modern academia or even modern media does to this day. He talks about how Lincoln was immediately deified upon his assassination on Good Friday, and how, for the past several years, his sculpture looms over the Washington Mall and, everything like that. But he essentially goes and he says that Lincoln was the most activist president of his time, and how how he went and changed things. He talks about how he expanded the Army and Navy, spent $2 million without congressional appropriation, blockaded southern ports, closed post offices to treasonable correspondence, suspended the writ of habeas corpus, ordered the arrest of civilians and of military officers with treasonous suspicions, and it broke an assortment of laws and the Constitution in order to achieve what he wanted. He talks about that. Sorry, Forrest just texted me. So he talks about that in there, and goes on to say, but if you look at Lincoln versus Lee and their ideology, they both believe that slavery was a moral issue, and this, that, and the other. The only thing that separated them was their idea of which was superior, states or the federal government overall. So, I mean, I don't like Lincoln being compared to Lee. I don't agree with that. But still, for someone who's listening to it, because of how deified Lincoln has been, that is a interesting way to make the argument. He does say that one person called Lincoln a first-rate, second-rate man, and then also goes into other quotes, contemporary quotes about Lincoln during that time, about him being vulgar and this, that, and the other, and it was really good. In his closing, which I really appreciated, and I actually turned on my dictation on my computer so I could record it. He said, reconciliation with the Union, talk about Lee after Appomattox, reconciliation with the Union. He urged his men to lay down their arms and return home and rebuild as loyal citizens. Today, efforts to erase Lee from history often stems not from sheer historical literacy, but a deeper motivation lurks resentment towards a man who embodies virtues increasingly rare in modern America. They hate him not for his flaws, but because he represents unattainable ideas, tactical genius, a man of unyielding duty, honor, and dignity. A Southerner whose leadership still echoes in military academies worldwide. They know they'll never measure up. No statue will rise to the fleeting figures like Mark Milley or anyone else, but Lee's legacy endures, outlasting the vandals who would topple his monuments or even disturb the resting place of his faithful horse traveler. In the end, Robert E. Lee is a reflection of the war itself, far more nuanced and multifaceted than these simplistic tales that we hear.
Ooh, wow.
Yeah. So even in his closing, and again, like we talked, he opens the door with Robert E. Lee. for us to then go and examine all Southern heroes, whether it's Jefferson Davis, whether it's Nathan Bedford Forrest, or whether it's your own Confederate ancestor, Captain Nathan W. Slay or Elijah Slay or one of the other Slay brothers, or Thomas Bond, or one of the other Bonds that served, or Private S.O. Dawes, or whomever your ancestor was. It causes us to sit back and reflect, because it opens the door. If Lee fought for this, then our ancestors surely fought with it. And the fact that he goes in and he lays out most of our arguments in a way that is very easy to understand, that is very defensible. Like I said, I have to give it a 4. And exactly, Charles, you're right. Better late than never. I'm sure you're talking about you being on the show or commenting on the show, but also better late than never that this documentary is coming out when it's coming out.
Yeah, no, I'll go ahead and kind of go through my closing. As you said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's definitely the best work and documentary to come out about the war in, golly, probably 10 years. If I hope I'm not leaving anybody out that actually did a good job, but to my knowledge, on the spot, definitely the biggest. This will reach millions upon millions of people, and it should. And that's why I wanted to say at the beginning of the show, and I'll say it at the end of the show, don't only share this episode out, watch this for yourself, but also introduce it to people. I think a lot of conservatives, potential members, will really start showing a lot more interest in our organization when they hear the truth. Even this little taste of it, because it's about an hour and 5 minutes long. It's not a traditional war documentary. It's more of the tale of how this has been turned around and how this has been falsified. But I put up Al's comment because it is refreshing to hear a major influencer, not just conservative, a major influencer, content creation like we're doing right now, like Matt Walsh, talk about the truth of the war instead of the usual Yankee propaganda. And that's why I would like to see as much support, and not only that, but share this episode out so other people can get introduced to it and show it to everybody you can.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it's not. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. But it is better than some. The biggest point here is that it's done by and for the so-called mainstream. Yes, exactly, Carl. This is, as far as it being a win for us, it's a 5.
Oh, it's a major 5. It's a massive win for us that we need to be celebrating.
Yeah, and the Daily Wire is, especially because we talked about with Charlie Kirk's assassination, how his show and other shows like the Daily Wire, Charlie Kirk was more for the in my opinion, using opinions. Well, I did listen to him. Harrison, what's our age difference? 6 years?
Yes, 6 years.
Okay, so there's
like 4 to 5, my man.
I thought you were born in 2000.
No, 99.
Okay, yeah, so 5 years, but still, Harrison and younger was, your 25-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
That was more Daily Wire, more your 30-year-old crowd. So if this gets 30, 40, so if this gets people interested in looking at everything like that, it's and Charles, that is a very, very good point. It would be a good camp program, because there's a lot of good history in it. But so if suddenly this gets 30 or 40-year-olds interested in hearing, I always liked Robert E. Lee, or I always thought something. Maybe it opens a door for us. But it is a really, really great. Give it a watch. Like I said, we're not trying to. They're not paying us for sure. Although Daily Wire, if you'd like to, Matt, throw us some money.
Sponsor us.
Yeah, throw us some money, or give us some equipment.
I'll take
anything y'all are trying to get rid of. But yeah, it really is a very refreshing view on the war. I can't wait to go, and because he has one on the institution of slavery itself, which is a standalone. I can't wait to go and watch it.
I can
just to see
quote
what he
that
puts
his
in there.
yeah, he also has one on the Native Americans, and I enjoyed that one. I've watched part of the one about the institution of slavery. Again, this is all great content and stuff that we should be watching and learning more about.
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
helps us defend our heroes. It helps our organization. It helps swing conservative minds to be more on our side. The politicians,
Or
this
well,
is a
the mainstream mind,
big mainstream.
and that. And I'm glad you said that. You know, we're charged to defend the Confederate soldier's good name, guard his history, and emulate his virtue. So this documentary helps us by defending the Confederate soldier's good name. It helps us, guard his history because we have to know his history. So yeah, like I said, as far as a win for us, a 5.
Yes.
This coupled with the South Carolina monument law being passed. 5.
Ooh,
Big
yeah.
5s. And we need those after what happened in Virginia.
Oh gosh, yeah. It
But
it was,
anyway.
it was rough there for a minute, but just like how the Northerners always look down upon us, we came out swinging and got 2 great wins.
Yeah. So what are you doing tomorrow night, Moose?
Well, I thought while I was setting up my business email that I would be watching and listening to Tennessee Tuesdays with Tennessee Division Commander John Blankenship. Congrats on the re-election. And of course, past Commander-in-Chief Jason Boshiers, the mighty T-Rex.
You say mighty?
Mighty T-Rex.
I thought you said mini.
Okay. Well, I mean, both are correct. This is my bye video of the organization. Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.
What about on Wednesday?
Well, Wednesdays I think I'll be watching Look Around Florida with the Florida man Sean McFall.
And Thursday, who you have? What do you have?
Well, we just got done with our second Army of Northern Virginia interview for Commander. We are looking to schedule the last 2 people now, so hopefully I'll have better results for that. But now we'll be covering the news that is the massive Confederate History and Heritage Month in April. So I'm begging everybody, send in as much news as possible. We'll be covering a lot this Thursday on Look Around.
Where can they send it?
They can send it to scvyouthOutreach@gmail.com, and you will be on the most recent episode of Look Around the Confederation. Make sure to send it in before Thursday at 3 p.m. because I am slammed with work right now and school, especially starting a business. I didn't know it was that tough. I really, really regret looking at my father saying, "I have this, my man," even though you've set up a couple businesses. Because wow. But that would really help me out if you could get it to us by 3 p.m. Confederate Standard Time.
And then, of course, this upcoming weekend, we have Confederate Memorial Day at Beauvoir. If you are within the driving area, Gulf Coast area, especially those in New Orleans, Mobile, come on over because it's our annual Confederate Memorial Day service at the Tomb of the Unknown Confederate Soldier. And we also have as our guest speaker, little feller from Virginia, Lieutenant Commander in Chief Tony Griffith. He's coming. So it should be a good weekend. I know everybody else has something going on. But think about if you're within driving distance, come on over. And we'll be back next Monday. I think we're gonna give Adam a month off because we have not done our Bible episode, spiritual episode. So I think we'll do that next Monday and let Adam sit back and enjoy things in Culleoka.
Yeah, bless his heart. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that episode. Again, I think it's a perfect way to end I've been promoting this whole month as big episodes all month long, and I think we've knocked it out of the park each time. Y'all have showed up in numbers to support the episodes. It's really been crazy how well viewership has been this month. I can't thank y'all enough for that. So make sure to tune in next Monday as we kind of put the cap on our big month that is April here on the show. I can't wait to see what we come up with to talk about when it comes to the spiritual night.
Yeah, I've got an idea.
I can't wait.
So, until then, let me check the last couple of comments. Gee, Adam was watching.
Hey,
hey,
take
Kayla somewhere nice like Waffle House. Anyway, in the words of the late and great Harold Philpott, threw me off with the corn dog thing.
Yes, it's happened to you. Clip that. That is going in the gag reel. Yes.
The gag reel you never make. Remember, no Fumar in the elevator, and also Rudder Frupp.
It's smoking.
Stay Southern.